super-enlightened. Oh, no, you're fine. I'm good. So good morning, everybody, and thank you for coming to my presentation, especially on the last day. I know it's early, and I barely made it here myself this morning, so good effort from everybody. My name is Jessica Mullins, and I'm a student from Indiana University Southeast, and I'm going to be talking about singularity theory today. And before I even go any further, I want to try and demystify or explain this big word singularity and what it really means as far as what I'm going to be talking about today. It's a term borrowed from astrophysics, and in that realm it really means like the development of black holes in space and spatial anomalies. But technological singularity is a little bit different, and that's what we're going to be talking about. It's basically the idea that the accelerated growth or the exponential growth of technology is going to lead to a rupture in the fabric of human civilization and human life. That's pretty broad still, so to narrow it down a bit further, because technology is exponentially increasing, developments in fields like, and most especially computer science, nanotechnology, biomedicine, robotics, are going to become more and more enhanced, eventually leading to anti-aging regimens, possibly giving us the ability to live very, very long, naturally, some would say, long life, and eventually leading to the taboo notion of artificial intelligence. Although, don't think necessarily like classic robots. We'll get to what artificial intelligence really means in terms of singularity. And it sounds like a bad sci-fi movie, or a good one, depending on your taste. But to sort of give some more context, these are going to be my points. I'm going to be discussing Singularity Origins, which I believe sort of really take place in the 1960s. Some people argue it was much earlier than that, but I think they really start to come to fruition in the 60s. Then I'm going to talk about how an idea transformed into a theory through Moore's law and the law of accelerating returns, which I'll explain a little bit further. And then how, once the culmination of these two things happened, how the theory transformed into an entire movement, a collection of people and ideas and even lingo that we see now through magazines, institutions, even universities. So then after that, I'm going to talk about what are these people doing? What are the real facts about the possibility of these new technologies? How can we use them as tools for enlightenment? Or on the other side of that, I'm going to sort of talk about how can they be problematic? I mean, I'm going to look at current and future trends and projections about human and technology use. Because they're actually pretty shocking. So origins. Oh, actually, I'm sorry. I got to introduce Bob and Rob because my IU people will appreciate that. These guys have followed me throughout this process, and they're saying, "Where are we?" And we're not you. We don't know where we are. Okay. So singular roots. It wasn't called singularity back in the 60s when I believe this idea was coming about, but it certainly was a very fascinating topic during this time. I believe the real visionary of this was a gentleman named Bernard Bench. Bernard Bench in the 60s was a sci-fi author, and he later got really invested in computer science and later even became a mathematics professor. He's now a retired professor. But in 65, he wrote Bookworm Run, which was a short story published in a science magazine. And it was really interesting. It was about a chimpanzee that was given digitally enhanced to sort of display human characteristics. It was human in all elements except for its exterior, obviously, as a chimp. So, but it got people talking. It got people interested in the possibility of computers and technology merging with organic life to sort of enhance that life. Eventually said he wanted to create a sequel in which he featured the first human with these sorts of implants and enhancements, but the publisher turned him down. So fortunately, even though he was turned down, there's another gentleman that we have to talk about, and I like to call him the revolutionary of this field, and that's Raymond Kurzweil. And if you don't know that name, it's not that surprising, but you probably soon will. I'm surprised he's not more known in our mainstream culture because he's just been incredibly incredibly influential in so many different fields. He's an inventor, an author, renowned scientist, and he's also a futurist, and we'll talk about what futurist actually means later. But he was also doing his thing in the 60s. In 63, he wrote his first computer program, and in 65, he used that program to sort of shock the nation. He was on a CBS program, which would be the equivalent of like a reality show now, where basically there was a lady sitting and there was a screen, and then he was on the other side, and a musical piece started playing. It was like a composition of sorts, a classical piece, and at the end of it, she was asked, so who played this? Was this a human, or was this a device, a machine? And naturally, she said, well, it was a human. But it was actually the program Kurzweil created. He created this program to play this piece in a very fluid, beautiful way, and he never actually touched a chord. So that really created fascination with this notion that technology can mimic human, not necessarily forms, but our abilities. Just to give you a little bit more about Kurzweil, he also invented so many things. I mean, it's the optical character recognition system, which is what we use with our text. Basically, when we type something into the computer recognizes what it is, no matter the font. He was extremely influential with the blind population. He created basically a reading device, a text-to-speech synthesizer, which read aloud so that the blind could hear whatever they wanted to listen to. So how did these ideas become more reality, become realized? Kurzweil kind of developed, well, he didn't develop this, but Moore's law is sort of what he is now kind of hyper-developed. And if you've not heard of Moore's law, I don't blame you, I never heard of it either. But it was established in 65 as well by Gordon Moore, who is the co-founder of Intel. And he discovered that the number of transistors placed on a circuit doubled every 2 years. So to understand what a transistor is, because I had to find out, it's a small electrical device, tiny, that is placed on a circuit that basically amplifies the power or the signal of the devices then later placed in. So anything, computers, phones, things like that. And this is just kind of a little chart showing that, Moore's law at work, 72, they could put 3,500 transistors. By 97, they were putting 7 million transistors. I guess these were probably different size circuits. I'm not really too sure about that. But Moore predicted this trend would last for 10 years, but actually it's lasted for half a century. So I think that that's pretty significant. And it does give some credence to Kurzweil's sort of belief that these numbers are going to continue. But not everybody believes that. Critics of Moore's law and Kurzweil suggest that eventually it will cap, and that our hardware isn't going to match our software. Our software isn't going to be as compatible with it as the hardware is. So Kurzweil kind of supplemented, basically I feel like he kind of took this idea that nobody's heard of, Moore's law from the 60s, and kind of made it his own, and kind of hyper-developed it into his law of accelerating returns, which is kind of tricky to understand because it's not super scientific. It's more this idea that biological systems sort of reflect the technological systems that they are paired with. He actually made logarithms saying, in 1910, this was the kind of technology we had. In 1920, this is what was going on, and he was able to precisely pair this kind of in tandem with Moore's law, saying our civilization has kind of exponentially grown as well. So these two things are going to continue growing together because that makes sense. So basically, in order to survive and evolve, we will develop ways to function with these technologies. So once all these things came together, obviously people became interested, especially the scientific community at large, and the Singularity Institute was formed in 2000, which is basically where the bigwigs of science, CEOs, meet and sort of discuss and hold conventions, kind of like this one, probably way cooler. Sorry, this is cool. And then the University of Singularity was also formed in 2009, and that's literally it's for graduate students, and they offer several different disciplines. And then there's also all kinds of publications. The Futurists, Wired Magazine, Artificial Intelligence, these are just a few. These are the really prominent ones that really, if you look at these magazines, which I've done for many of my sources, you really see the influence of Kurzweil in many of those and this idea about our future. And that's sort of the lingo going on in this realm. There's futurists and Luddites. You'll hear that often if you ever look into any of these things. Futurists are simply people who seek to systematically try to predict the future based on the past by researching current trends, future projections, things like that. Luddites are individuals who generally really oppose new technologies and industrialization and automation in general. It's pretty general, but I just want to give you an idea there. So now that all these people are involved, I just wanted to kind of talk about the different technologies. They're really interesting. I'm not an expert in any of these, but I think that they're worth mentioning. Kurzweil is really interested in nanobites and nanotechnology. And I don't know if you can see it, but that's a little nanorobot there. And basically what these things do, in theory, I don't think they've been tested on humans. We'll see that they've been tested on animals here in a second. But nanobots, according to Kurzweil, his idea is that they would circulate in our bloodstream and would keep us healthy at a cellular and molecular level, which sounds pretty far-fetched. But I think that we already have something called a Nanorobot, which I have a picture of, that does go into our body and attaches to a specific receptor and helps fix that receptor from whatever it's damaged from, whatever disease or problem it's having. So I guess this is where Kurzweil believes if we have these little machines in here sort of regulating us, we'll be able to basically live longer. It's an anti-aging idea. And it's been tested. Scientists at MIT cured type 1 diabetes in rats through the use of nanobots. So it's certainly something that I think could be really interesting for certain diseases in humans that may have the ability to be, and to at least be further researched or even eventually cured. Then we have brain emulation, and this one is a lot farther away from any sort of real recognition in the science community. But Kurzweil suggests that the electrical patterns of the brain will be able to be scanned into a computer system. He kind of believes that really electrical pulses are really how our brain functions, and then these can be studied so that we can have computer systems or computer programs that can mimic these systems, so that basically we'd be able to create possibly characters or programs that mimic us. Just some easy steps, scanning human brains, creating brain emulations in advanced computer hardware, and scientists studying these simulations, finding out subtle nuances about how they work, and then basically creating various systems that are capable of self-modification and improvement. This is a picture from Second Life, and there's so many games like this. I mean, you can make your character however you want, but in this game you can actually make it look like you, and you can see, you can't really see too well, but this person, I mean, literally looks identical to the other side of her character there. So basically this idea is that the character will not only look like us, will act like us. But these, projections here, most believe next 50 to 75 years, I think Kurzweil included. And then we'll talk a little bit about robotics, just because they're neat. Currently we have all kinds of interesting advances in this field. This is a Mac robot, I believe, the one I was telling you about that's like a nanobot that has been used in humans. Then we have Big Dog. He is a military robot. He has 4 legs. He can run 4 miles an hour. He can hold 375 pounds. He has super sensitive sensors and reactors in his feet and throughout his circuitry that allows him to determine where to step. Then I just thought this was a cool picture of a gentleman with a cybernetic arm drinking water. And my favorite is Little Bugger. He actually scans infrared rays into a glass of wine or a bottle of wine and determines the composition of what's in there and is able to pair it with a dish. So we go to parties. But then I have another example of a robot, and this is Swan Song. And Swan Song was playing a violin at a convention in Japan, at a Toyota convention. And onlookers said that although the robot robot was eerily precise, that it lacked basically a human touch. And I think that's where we need to sort of reevaluate, think about these things. We need to define what is a human touch, what is intelligence. I think it's been evolving and changing really rapidly, and we haven't stopped to think about that. According to Kurzweil, intelligence is simply the ability to recognize and solve a problem in a very precise and efficient manner, like a computer system would do. And I know we've always been told human wisdom is all about experience and growth and all of these very novel things, but I think we should decide sort of how much we really value that. So in order to kind of delve into that a little bit further, I think it's important that we look at sort of future projections that I found and compare those with current trends of computer use and technology use, basically. Global internet traffic, these are all World Bank data statistics, is projected to quadruple by 2015. And World Bank also projects that by 2015, network-connected devices will outnumber people 2 to 1. So that means that basically we clearly need technology. I mean, we rely on it. It's just we can't go back now. I mean, we have to have it. I have to have all this just to talk to you. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I think that in a lot of ways it's helped our civilization become more connected. But I think it's just a matter of balancing that with real human connection. Some more interesting statistics. 90 million Americans currently use smartphones, and projections show that 150 million will own one by 2015. I also read that in 1990, there were 0.8% internet users on the planet per 100 people. And in 2010, it had grown to 79%. I'm sorry I didn't put that graph up here, but I just thought that was really astronomical. So you don't see that decreasing, you see that continuing. So basically, I wanted to show this to just to give you some more localized stats. At IUS, the school I go to, many people in here go to, student to faculty ratio is 17 to 1, but the student to computer ratio is 8 to 1. So that's pretty significant. I mean, there's double the amount of computers to students as there is teachers. So clearly this is important. It's important to our learning. It's important to our development on college campuses, everywhere. So just to sort of recap everything I've said, whether we merge with machines in 30 years or not, it's clear that technology is going to continue to soar to new heights. And it's just, I think we just need to sort of evaluate our own relationship with technology, maybe compare it to, how much time do we spend on our smartphone, how much time do we spend with an actual person. I mean, I'm sure you've all noticed when you go into classrooms, when you go into offices, people are interacting with their screens, they're in their private spheres, interacting with things that are supposed to be connecting us, but we're in a silent room. So I'm not saying that these things are necessarily totally detrimental, but I think we have the potential to be if we're not aware of them. I think that's I'll try to answer questions.
I have a question about the Nanobots.
Yes.
So it seems like a great idea, but if they malfunction, I've heard this, they start using carbon or something that life needs to have. Is there any way they can go in and find them and take all of them out because they're so small or fix them?
I thought about this last night too, and I think that that's probably why they haven't tested it on humans, because it's just such an early stage. I think Kurzweil's argument would be that in 20 to 30 years, we might be able to have the technologies to actually remedy those things or be able to maybe take them out and maintenance them somehow, put them back in. Yeah, but that's a good question, and I think that, yeah, they could be a really great idea if they're monitored.
Do you think that the Swanson robot that played at the Toyota thing, do you think that if he had been behind a screen or something that the audience would have reacted the same way that the woman on CBS did?
I thought about that too. I thought that was an interesting parallel between the two. I think that it maybe would have had to do with what the piece was and how recognizable it was. If it was something like composed by an individual, or it was something like, I don't know what the song was, but I think that's a good question. I would like to have been there. Unless I'd heard it, I wouldn't know that.
idea? What prompted you to, how did this come about?
I was in a writing class last semester, and we had to read an article. This was actually featured on the cover of Time magazine, and that just struck me as being very. Usually, you think of Time magazine as super. It's pretty. I don't know about currently, but it's usually been pretty scholarly and reliable. So I just thought, wow, this is on the cover of Time. This is a big deal. I should look into this. So I'm not naturally a computer science major, but I do find it really fascinating. I'm more concerned with the effects of human interaction as a result of all these things. Sure. Anybody? Yes, Ms. Andrew.
Do you think that technology and, or I guess human biology and technology are merged? Do you think it'll affect like human psychology or human interaction in a negative way or a positive way?
Well, I know it will affect it. And that's the thing I've been trying to gauge is how it will affect it. And it's hard to say. It depends on how far flung these things get. I think that we just have to constantly be aware of what we're doing and how reliant we are on it, and if we can function without it or not. But it really depends on how advanced they get. Yes, Ms.
In your speech, you mentioned that Kurzweil's definition of intelligence may be lacking. Is there anything that you would add to it?
Yeah, I mean, I honestly feel like Kurzweil is sort of using this definition almost as to overlook, other like human experience and wisdom and things that we've always been sort of brought up with to believe are forms of intelligence, to sort of give more justifiable reasons for why he believes singularity won't pose any damaging effects to our civilization. But I think he is overlooking it a little bit. I mean, I don't know that